Matt, I think we have a quorum. If you have the attendance sheet with you, and if you can confirm, I actually don't have it with me at the very moment. That would be great. But I think we're good to go. Matt, I don't know if you're able to hear me.
I couldn't, now I can.
Oh, okay, great. Super. I think we have a quorum. I don't have the sheet with me right at this moment, but I believe that we are.
Apologies, I'm looking at it now. I think we should be, but I'm going through people now.
Okay. All right. So I think it's safe to start. Matt confirms that we indeed do have a quorum. Good evening, everyone. My name is Leila Logiziko. I'm the chair of the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Community Board 5. We have one item tonight on the agenda. It's an application for a transfer of development right pursuant to a brand new zoning text article that we actually did review a couple of months ago called Zoning for Accessibility. The project is located at 41-47 West 57th Street. I hope I'm getting the address correctly. And we are going to hear a presentation from the applicant. We are also joined by a member of the MTA, as this has a accessibility component with some upgrades to a subway station that is in the vicinity of this development. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed. The applicant will be given the opportunity to give a full and uninterrupted presentation. Other experts on this application will be given an opportunity to speak, and that includes MTA if they have any additional information that they wish to share with us. I believe that we're also joined by someone from the Department of City Planning who will be given an opportunity to speak once again if they have any additional information they wish to share with members of the committee. Once this presentation concludes, we will move to questions from members of the committee. Members of the committee will have the opportunity to ask all of the questions that they need to, clarify. We will then open up to members of the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments on this proposal. The applicants will have an opportunity to address both the questions and comments. If I see that there's a large turnout from members of the public, we will bundle the questions and comments, and then the applicant will be given a chance to respond to all of those at once. Then once that concludes, we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. We will do exactly that, and then we will make a motion. This motion will be taken to a vote. This vote will then be presented as the position of the committee to the full board of Community Board 5, which meets next week. Please check the website for the exact date and time. Our website is cb5.org. The full board will take a vote on this motion presented by the committee, and the vote of the full board becomes the official position of Community Board 5. Okay, so I hope all of that is clear. Let's jump right in. But before actually we hear this presentation, I want to mention that we have another item on the agenda that is a discussion item, and that concerns the creation of a task force of Community Board 5 to deal with the open restaurant program that is being overseen by the Department of Transportation. We will formally announce the creation of the task force and discuss the goals and the purpose of this task force. So please, members of the committee, once this presentation and application review concludes, don't run away. We're not going to adjourn quite yet. We will discuss this, announce and discuss the creation of this task force. Okay, so with all of that being said, let's jump right in. I think we have the team of applicants for the application. And we are ready to hear your presentation. You can take it from there and share your screen and tell us about this project.
Okay, welcome. Thank you. I'm Caroline Harris. I'm a partner at Goldman Harris. And the screen should be showing you the beginning of our PowerPoint presentation.
We are seeing you for the moment. And
we need to ask you to let Giovanni Gioia in to do that.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think he is now a panelist. So yes, he is a panelist and he is able to share his screen. Here we go.
Terrific. Great. Once again, I'm Caroline Harris. I'm a partner at Goldman Harris, and I'm really very proud to be presenting this project to you today. Project that will make the station at 57th Street and 6th Avenue, the INDF train station, fully accessible to riders with disabilities. The application is an authorization for additional floor area for mass transit station improvements at that location, and it will be the floor area will be utilized at 41-47 West 57th Street. Next. The applicant team is comprised of my firm, which I already introduced. The applicant, we write Sidesco here. You'll see in the application itself is written Bob 57 LLC. That is a single purpose LLC owned by parties who are part of Sidesco, and Sidesco is acting as the managing agent for the project. So often you'll hear, and mostly you'll hear us talk about Sidesco, even though technically the landowner is the Bob LLC. Sidesco is represented here by Derek Gilchrist, who's the general counsel and director of this project. He's going to be available later for questions if we need to turn to him for any of the answers. OMA is the design architect firm, well known internationally for their principal, Rem Koolhaas, and as you'll see in the design, equally wonderful design with their New York office, which we'll introduce later. Urban Architects are the subway station improvement architects, and we'll go into more detail later, also introducing each of the people in both of those firms who've been involved with this important project. Next. So the proposed subway improvements, as I mentioned, are going to be at the INDF train station at the 57th Street stop. That station extends from 56th Street north to 58th Street. And the improvement here will be 2 elevators that will make the station accessible to people with disabilities or people who are just more comfortable using a subway elevator because they don't want to get the exercise, or because they have baby carriages or whatever packages they're carrying, and it would be easier to use an elevator. The elevator will travel from the street, and you see an image here of the entrance to the elevator at the southwest corner of 56th Street and 6th Avenue. It will go from the street to the mezzanine. If you're familiar with that station, there's a pretty long mezzanine that extends from end to end. The person will be able to then go through a handicapped accessible fare array into another elevator that connects between the mezzanine and the platform. There are other station improvements. And in addition to the improvements directly to the station, there will be 8 ADA crosswalk ramps installed on the 4 corners closest to this elevator. So people who are disabled will have an easy time getting to the elevator and using it to get to the subway platform. The project also involves funding ongoing maintenance and replacement of the improvements to the station. It's funded for a term of 36 years and includes replacement of the subway one time. That funding is being done rather than having the developer do the maintenance of the elevator. In this case, the elevator is remote from the location of the developer's building, and it would be awkward for a developer with a building in a remote location to be running over to the subway station to do the maintenance or repairs on the subway, and it's all interior to MTA property. So the decision was made that the developer would make a lump sum payment to the MTA at the beginning of the project before occupancy in order to fund that ongoing maintenance and replacement obligation. The building that the developer is constructing at 41-47 West 57th Street will not be able to get a temporary certificate of occupancy for occupancy of all or any part of the building until not only the work is done in the station, but that fund is completely financed. Details on the design of the subway improvements are going to be shared with you by Urban Architects, who made the design. They're industry leaders in New York City transportation, and they won the premier award, the ENR New York 2019 award for design in the transportation field. So we're really fortunate to have them here tonight to be able to explain more of the details of the subway improvements. Next. The proposed building at 41-47 West 57th Street will be iconic. You can see it here in the middle of the photograph with a rendering. It was designed, as I said, by world-renowned architects, OMA, led by the Pritzker Prize-winning Rem Koolhaas, with Jason Long in the New York office. It's going to be a mixed-use building with ground floor retail, hotel, and residential use. There'll be 137 keys and 33 dwelling units as it's proposed today, as it's planned. There might, of course, over the course of the time of this approval, getting the plans approved and the construction, there may be slight changes to those figures, but all of them are far less than what was considered in the environmental assessment statement and well within the zoning requirements or permits. It will end up being a 16.53 FAR building, including a 2.75 FAR bonus of 53,029 square feet. It'll be 1,100 feet tall. That's the same height that it could be if it were built without the bonus. And it will cast virtually the same shadow as an as-of-right building would cast. As you know, there's no height limit in this district, and there are very unusual constraints on the design of a building, which mean that there won't be there's no required setback as there would be in a quality housing building. So the design of the building is very flexible in an as-of-right situation. This proposed building is also shorter than other super tall buildings on 57th Street. So I wondered myself, how is it possible to have 53,000 square feet more in a building, not make it taller? Well, I answered the question myself. When I gain weight, I don't get taller. And in this case, the weight gain is in parts of the building that are not really visible to either side of the building by the public, sort of like me wearing a loose sweater. So OMA is going to explain that in more detail, but that gives you sort of layperson's explanation of how the building has 52,000 square feet more, but isn't taller than it would have or could have been on an as-of-right basis. The next page, please. To orient you a little more carefully, here's a zoning map serving double duty, both to orient you to the location. As you can see, we're here at East 57th Street. The blue is the development site. The development site is not a regular sized lot, or a regular shaped lot, I should say. It's a kind of zigzag lot, and that affected the design of the building, which again, OMA will explain. And it straddles 3 different zoning districts. It's in a C5 2.5 in Midtown, here on the 58th Street side of the site. It's in a C5 3 portion of Midtown on the south side of the site, and a very little strip of C5 1 that's not in Midtown. The site is very close to the 57th Street and 6th Avenue station and the IND, which, as I described before, extends from 58th Street, and it goes all the way, I misspoke, I said 56, it goes to 55th Street. And the new elevator that's proposed at street level is here where the green star is at 56th Street. The FARs of these 3 zoning districts differ. Therefore, there's a blended FAR. I have a little sheet here that explains it. The maximum blended FAR with this special permit is 16.53, not a more regular 18 FAR or other number like that. It's because of the blending of the floor area ratios in these 3 different districts. So if you could move it ahead. So the proposed action, it's an authorization under section 66.511 of the zoning resolution, the additional floor area for mass transit station improvements that was recently approved in the ZFA text, as your chair mentioned before. This allows a 20% FAR bonus for substantial improvements to mass transit station. I've mentioned the address of the station and the development site and the various zoning districts involved. But because part of it is in the Midtown district, the distance that the development site may be from the granting station is 1,500 feet. Outside of the central business district, which is that little sliver on the northwest side of the site, may be within 500 feet. In either case, this site is well within those radii, being 210 feet to 168 feet from the edge of the granting station. So I want to tell you a little bit about the go through a little bit about the importance of the project before you learn more details about the subway improvements or the building. First of all, here's a photograph of the intersection at 57th and 6th, the top one looking north, the bottom one looking south. And if you look really carefully, you'll notice, of course, there is no elevator at these corners, nor down the street. It's a busy intersection. You have bus routes here on the eastern side of 6th Avenue You have bus route going across town on 57th Street. There are many pedestrians. It's a very popular neighborhood and a busy intersection. If you turn the page again, you can see here that in Midtown, where there are almost 40% of the subway stations are not accessible to disabled people, this IND station will be the second accessible station in the central portion of northern Midtown. This station here at 57th Street and 7th Avenue with the NW, R, and Q line was only made accessible in June of this year. The next accessible station on the F line is at Rockefeller Center, over 2,000 feet away from this location. The other accessible station, the other F train station that is accessible is off this map at 63rd Street and Lex, 11 blocks away. The F train is a pretty important train. Not that any of them aren't important, but this one is unusual in that it connects Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. It connects with other stations that intersect with the 4, 5, 6, A, B, C, D, E, G, M, N, Q, R, and W lines, many stations of which are accessible. This means that somebody who gets on the F train at any one of these other stations where you see an accessibility symbol will now be able to arrive in Midtown Manhattan at 57th and 6th and be able to exit the train safely. It also means somebody getting on the subway at this location or will be able to cross over to all of those other lines at some point on the ride. That makes it a really important project. It serves a broad network of the subway system and also serves Midtown. The site, as I mentioned before, is also adjacent to several local bus lines, as well as certain interborough buses. The QM 10, 12, 15, 16, 17, and 18, and 24, the SIM 6, 10, and 30, and the M31 and the M57. So it's a very connected station, and by making it accessible to people with disabilities, it becomes a real hub for mass transit use by people who have disabilities or who otherwise want or need to use an elevator to get into the station. Next. So here's another image of the elevator entrance at the southwest corner of 57th and 6th. And I want to share with you that we've been working really hard on this project for a while, and we have support from quite a few stakeholders. The Riders Alliance is supporting this project, and they have expressed their support in a letter, and I believe they may be speaking tonight. If not, we do have the letter and have submitted it to the community board. 32BJ will be speaking tonight in support of the project. The Hotel Trade Council is speaking in favor of the project tonight, and the Center for Independence of the Disabled, Monica Bartley, will be here tonight as well. I believe they have signed up in support of the project in the public session of the program. But for now, I'll be turning this program over to Nat from Urban. And if we could move to the next slide, we could give them a better introduction. We have Nat Barranco, who's the principal. Ryan Bieber was the project manager on this project, and Leanna Torres was the designer. They will describe their own history a little bit, so you can know that we are working with the top designer of transit stations in New York City. And now I turn it over to Nat.
Thank you, Caroline. So as Caroline mentioned, Urban Architects has been a leader in New York City transportation since 1983. in addition to being principal charge and one of the three principal shareholders in Urban Architects and the leader of the transportation group. A little bit more about Urban, next slide. As I mentioned, we've been involved in transportation projects since 1983, and our work on accessibility for the disabled predates the ADA program dictated by the federal government. And it originally was called an E&H program for elevators that we were involved in the early 80s. As ADA took on, I would say 95% of our projects involve accessibility. And some of our more prominent Manhattan projects that you probably are aware of is we were the architects for the 53rd and Lexington Avenue accessibility project by Citicorp, and the 96th Street Broadway station, which involved placing a new station kiosk and park on the Upper West Side. So we do have significant experience, and we understand what it takes to interject an elevator into a subway system while ultimately providing a great benefit to the community. Next slide. So when we start a project and we begin to look at accessibility, first and foremost is what is the best location for the street elevator and what is the best location for us to create a clear, safe, and succinct path of travel from the street to the boarding area to allow a disabled person or anybody who chooses the elevator and needs assistance to get on or off a subway car. So the first criteria is that the accessible route needs to be coincidental to one of the primary paths of travel. And at this station, there are a number of primary paths of travel. The elevators should be highly visible to customers so as to not create any kind of safety and security risk for people who use the elevators. The elevators should be located near street intersections. And once located, they need to descend to the unpaid side of the control area. What is also important is that the elevator locations minimize impact to the structure of the existing station and minimize utility relocations. Because that tends to, it drives the cost up and becomes kind of a bit infeasible. So we try to avoid that to the greatest extent possible, but if those things are necessary to achieve accessibility, we deal with those things. Next slide. So at this station, we looked at a number of different locations and we applied that same criteria, to those locations. And what we found was, next slide, please. Because of the way the station was constructed, the existing sewer wrapped around all the entrances when they built the mezzanine. And so it is, in some cases, it is either literally impossible to place an elevator and make a connection in the station to cross the sewer, or it would involve a significant reconstruction and infringement into the street. The location that became very obvious is the location we are presenting today, which is on the southwest corner of 56th Street, because it met all the criteria, the selection criteria that we talked about earlier. It minimized impact to the existing station structure, and it provided a minimal impediment to the existing utility infrastructure. So next slide. So here you see the street level improvements, the elevator location, as I articulated a little bit earlier, and the 8 accessible reconstruction of the 4 corners to provide 8 accessible curve cuts along with crosswalks to make the intersection accessible and to help the transfer from buses to the elevator. I'd like to zoom in a little bit more on the elevator location in the next slide. You can go to the next slide, please. One of our objectives in working with New York City Transit and the various and DOT is to minimize impact to pedestrian and vehicle movement at this location. You can see here that the existing stair to the station has an 8-foot, 11-foot clearance. The way we've designed the elevator is we've positioned it so that we are actually slightly further away from the existing building than that stair, and we're not infringing into the curb line or the bike lane or the pedestrian flow. We've also set the elevator far enough away from the corner to not provide any kind of impact to corner traffic of pedestrians, and we've created a safe place for the disabled or people who want to use the elevator to wait. This was vetted with New York City Transit, excuse me, and New York City DOT, and they approved this as being the best location for this, the best position of the elevator for the site. Excuse me again. Next slide. So once you enter the elevator, you come down to the mezzanine adjacent to that existing stair we mentioned, and you actually enter, we've created an alcove, which gives people who are coming off the elevator, you know, an open space that provides access and a safe place to wait. Our positioning of the elevator from the mezzanine to the platform was located to provide the minimum amount of travel at the mezzanine level to get to that elevator. As part of our efforts to reduce the travel path, we added a new control area. So, because right now you would have to go all the way to the token agent if you wanted to use that elevator, and we didn't do this, and come all the way back. But we want to minimize that traffic pattern. So we created a new control area so people who are disabled who want to use that elevator can come right in and come out, have direct access. And when they come down to the platform, they have direct access to the existing ADA boarding area that was constructed as part of the recent renovation and reconstruction of the existing station. Next slide. And just to conclude, in addition to full accessibility through the use of the elevators and the addition of a new station entry control area, we added new communication systems to increase security and safety. A new fire alarm system throughout the station, and our design as we come into the station is intended to match and be consistent with the aesthetics established under the recent renovation program at 57th Street. And at this point, I think I'd like to introduce Jason, who can speak to the build portion.
I'd like to interrupt for just a moment, if I may.
No, please.
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay, you can, I'm heard. I didn't know that. I thought maybe I was cut off for a second. We could, I'd like to just say that we worked, as Nat indicated, we worked really closely with the MTA on the design of, and the location and design of these subway improvements. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Moonsun Park in particular, who we've been working with for years on this design and location and so on. And she will be speaking later, but I did want to take the opportunity to say that, also with the other engineers at MTA. And that resulted, this project has resulted in MTA's preparing a letter that was submitted to the New York City City Planning Commission, stating that this concept plan is worthy of MTA's approval in connection with the authorization that we are seeking. Not only did it meet MTA's approval, but it is sufficient for the findings required under section 66.511. If later you want me to go through those findings, I will, but I just wanted to insert that this proposal does provide public benefit for the mass transit station improvements that merit the amount of additional floor area being granted to the proposed development pursuant to the authorization. That's the basic finding. In addition, for accessibility or enhancing improvements, the finding is that such improvements will constitute significant enhancements to connectivity from the pedestrian circulation network to and through the mass transit station. Nat has demonstrated that with his presentation. And again, with the ramps at the sidewalk corners, it assists in the pedestrian flow and the movement on the street, along with people who may be in wheelchairs. assisting them to get to the elevator. So now we'd like to turn it over to OMA. We have
And
Jason.
I'm gonna ask you actually to maybe pick up the pace a little bit, although
Sure.
you're the only application tonight. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, and I see we're getting close to 7, so we want to make sure that we're gathering all the facts. We don't want to miss out any important part of the presentation. But we want to make sure everybody has a chance to really comment and also let members of the public speak on this important matter. So yeah,
We'd be happy to speed it up. Give us about what time frame are you looking at, Layla? About 10 minutes?
When you and I spoke, we had said that the presentation roughly would be 20-25
minutes. Right. We're a little over.
If we can stay as close to this as possible, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the last part, and we'll be very efficient. We made a very simple building, so hopefully it's very easy to present. So I'm Jason Long. I'm a partner with OMA, a firm founded by Dutch Pritzker Prize-winning architect Rem Koolhaas, as Caroline mentioned. And I'm joined here in our West Soho, New York office by Yusuf Dennis, who's the associate in charge of this project, and also Alex Klufers, one of the architects working on the project. Next. Our firm is known for doing many buildings throughout the world, often cultural buildings, always distinct designs that really respond, we hope, always to the unique conditions of the site, culture, and program that they're trying to accommodate. And often our buildings, as you can see here, from the Seattle Central Library to the China Central Television headquarters building in Beijing, exemplify, I think, an effort to really merge engineering with architecture to achieve unique ends. Next. So when we began looking at this site, which stretches between 57th Street and 58th Street, just in from 6th Avenue, we could immediately see that while there are, of course, amazing opportunities and an amazing location, there were also challenges. If you take a kind of simple rectangular footprint that might be the most obvious response for a residential building here, you end up constrained on either side by, of course, the presence of adjacent buildings and limitations to where one can put windows. So while this footprint might yield the smallest footprint and the highest building, we didn't want to just pursue height for height's sake, but rather to create a response that was very specific to this condition and could unlock something special within it. Next. So taking advantage of the L shape, or let's say J shape of the site, we, instead of creating a simple rectangle, have introduced an I-shaped plan, almost like the shape of an I-beam, that could expand the footprint on the south through a kind of south bar, and then while also thinning out the building in the middle to unlock views to the south from the north bar, which you see here. So creating an overall footprint that would really unlock the potential for the way that it could integrate into the city, but also the way that it would look out to the city and Central Park to the north. Next. So here you see this kind of simple rectangular footprint where, again, the program available would almost push the building up to a potential height of even 1,400 feet. Rather than pursuing that strategy of just height for height's sake, we've extended the form. So next. So splaying the building out towards the north, widening its base, and creating additional structural stability, almost like a ladder, and sloping the building back away from the north at 4 degrees up the entire length of the building. And then on the southern end, next, the southern bar expands out to the west, creating new views to the park, and then sloping back again towards the highest part of the building at 2.3 degrees. Next. Caroline Harris mentioned that we have presented in the EIS kind of no action and with action scenarios that actually have the same or nearly the same envelope. They have the same height and the outer dimensions are all the same. Where we're adding the 53,000 square feet of bonus zoning floor area, primarily in the inner part of the I-beam, so to speak. And next. So you can see that illustrated here on a typical plan. This is the 35th floor, actually. And so on the left is the no action scenario, and on the right is the with action. So with the additional 53,000 bonus zoning square feet. And so here you can see that on the northern bar, we add 4 feet to the south, and on the southern bar, we add 4 feet to the north. And in the middle zone, we widen by 2 feet on either side. So it's really in this mid zone that we're adding the extra area so that it doesn't have additional impact on shadow or even the appearance of the bulk of the building when viewed from the outside. Next. We think that as a whole, the design really fits into the site almost like a key into a lock. It's a very simple form, but one that varies from different vantage points around the city, as the interplay of slope planes and straight planes creates a kind of dynamic, almost a sculpture within the skyline. It's also a form that we think resonates with some of our neighbors, particularly the Solo building to the east. Next. We hope that it will be an elegant addition, an elegant and multi-layered addition to the skyline. Here you see a view you saw a minute ago with the looking directly south. Next. And we think that the simplicity of its form and the way that it splays out at its base both establishes and also conveys a kind of structural stability that we think is appropriate and even necessary for a building of this height. Next. At the ground plane, we have entrances for the residential portion of the building on 58th Street and for the hotel and retail spaces on 57th Street. At 57th Street, we're stepping back and creating a recess for entrances to the hotel and this restaurant space, kind of stepping back the base of the building beside the retail space at by 14 feet, which allows us to still adhere to the street wall requirements along 57th Street while widening and creating a more generous entry condition as well. Next. And here you see the kind of elevation along the south side of Central Park. As I mentioned, we're not trying to pursue a building that has that's as high as it potentially could be, but rather one we hope will fit well within the skyline. And here you see it with kind of 57th Street neighbors from 220 Central Park South, the Central Park Tower, to 157, the Steinway building, and then our building here in the middle of this image. It's obviously not the tallest of these by any stretch. Next. And here you see your series of elevation of these more recent tall or super tall towers along 57th Street, where we're sitting clearly in the middle of the heights and really in the kind of lower end as well. Next. And so in short, we hope this building can be a really simple, elegant, and dynamic addition to the skyline and unlock really potentials both from within it and also in ways that it can be viewed from without as well. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. I just want to make sure that our partners at the MTA and the Department of City Planning are given the opportunity to add anything if they wish before we move to the question session. I know that we have MTA in the room. I don't know if they want to add anything at this point, but that would be the opportunity. Caroline, I don't know if they wish to speak now.
I believe that Ms. Park, who's here with the MTA, is available for questions, but I don't know that she had a prepared statement.
Got it.
And
okay.
Same with city planning.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you so much. So I would make one comment on the deck that we just saw. There are no page numbers, or at least we could not see any page numbers. I don't know if there's this portion is cropped, but I have some specific questions to specific pages. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you where they are, and it will make sense. Be patient with us. All right, so let's move to questions from members of the committee. You can use the raise hand function to indicate you have a question. Clayton, you have your hand up, and go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I have 3 questions. One is, I know the 20% bonus is allowed underneath this initiative, but I don't think we actually got a percentage from you. What is the actual percentage that you are seeking from this proposal?
20%.
It is 20. Okay, thank you. You said that 20% would cast quote virtually the same shadow, but we didn't see a shadow study. Do you have specifics and details for the exact shadow increment that we would be gaining from the bonus?
There's no, when I said virtually, it was just a figure of speech. These are the slides, by the way, so if you need to refer to them. We are here accompanied also by VHB, which is our technical environmental consultant, and they can more readily address the question about the shadow, if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
So, Catherine, can you get onto the Zoom?
Actually, if you can identify who those folks are and the attendees.
Catherine Zanell.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other members of your team who should be promoted to panelists, Carolyn?
We have Derek Gilchrist, in case there's a question for him, Catherine, and I think that covers our group.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Catherine. Thank you for promoting me to panelist. My name is Catherine Zanell. I work at VHB, and we have prepared the environmental review for this project. So to your question, Clayton, as you alluded to, the purpose of the environmental review process that we conducted is to measure the difference between what is allowed to be built today and what could be built if the applicant makes improvements to the nearby subway station and therefore receives the bonus. To answer your question, because the outermost extent of the building would not change, there is no difference in the way that the shadows would be cast with the incorporation of the bonus. I think OMA had spoken to how the bonus is incorporated into the recessed portions of the building, such that the outermost extent would remain the same and you would not see a difference in shadows with the incorporation of the bonus.
Do you have the visuals? Can we actually see the shadow impact?
What we would study would be the difference. And because
I understand what you are required to study. You probably, I'm sure, understand that we believe that the requirement of the environmental review are flawed, and this is something that we have been very concerned with from the very beginning of this proliferation of super tall towers on 57th Street. And, although the other towers were mostly as of right, not entirely as of right, but mostly as of right, they have cast shadows that unfortunately cannot be assessed or mitigated because simply the tool does not exist in the toolbox, which is not to say that the community board is not interested in this data. So I certainly appreciate that you only measure the increment in shadows, but our question tonight is, do you have a shadow assessment for this particular building with a rendering that we could look at?
Thank you. I appreciate your explanation, and I understand your concern given the proximity to Central Park and other important open space resources in the area. We don't have an assessment looking at the shadow that would be cast by the outermost extent of the building, because what we would study would be the difference. And since that's not the case here, we don't have a shadows analysis looking at the outermost extent of the building itself.
Okay. Clayton, I think you had one more question, or maybe even some.
Yeah. I did, well, I mean, I could follow up about that, but I think we know where that's going to go. I have a question about the funding for the future improvements and maintenance. That part seemed, I appreciate that it doesn't make sense for the developer to, like, as you said, like run down the block to take care of the elevator. But the model of a lump sum for all future improvements feels like a disaster waiting to happen. It feels like 15 years from now, when everything breaks, guess what? The lump sum has already been moved through, and then what happens? I mean, we're so used to the MTA being oversaddled with commitments and underfunded despite hiking up the fares and everything else. So I'm just wondering if you can speak with any more detail or explanation as to what went into the thinking as to why on earth one lump sum today was a good idea, or even potentially effective for maintaining this incredibly complicated and important equipment in perpetuity.
And if I can just add to that important question, maybe we would like to hear from the MTA on how they're going to structure the use of these funds. I mean, if we were to hear that these funds are actually not going into the general pool, that would certainly help mitigate our concerns. So we would love to hear also from the MTA on, how the funds are going to be, specifically directed to this piece of infrastructure.
Sure. Hi, can folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. I'm Moonsun Park with the MTA. Before I answer that, I don't have prepared remarks, as Carrie was saying, but I would like to mention that we are very excited to have this station be made accessible through the zoning bonus. We do believe that, and this will actually help to achieve the goals of zoning for accessibility, which is making our system more accessible to help us achieve system-wide accessibility more quickly and efficiently and cheaply. In answer to the question about the lump sum payment for maintenance and capital and the capital replacement of the 2 elevators, that is standard that we negotiate, or that we actually didn't even negotiate. We told Sidesco what the value of the maintenance would be, along with the capital replacement for the 2 elevators. It's 2 life cycles as well as 1 capital replacement. And it was actually a very smooth conversation with Sidesco. And it is discounted to present value, just to be very clear. And it was, as I said, it was an easy conversation. We know what the cost is for maintaining, for all of our labor, as well as the equipment. With that said, the lump sum payment will be put into our general operating fund, and it will be added to our inventory of elevators that we will be maintaining.
Okay, thank you. Clayton, do you have any follow-ups, or is it okay to move on? We can always come back to those.
You can move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is going to Nancy.
My question is it possible to install 2 elevators side by side, since oftentimes these elevators go out of service, and to have redundancy in ADA accessibility would be very important. So often I use these elevators, and so often they're out of service. So would it be possible to put in 2 elevators? That's my question.
In theory, working with the MTA, a station could have 2 elevators. This has not been worked on in this project. I don't know whether MTA has a policy about 1 or 2 elevators, and would be happy for Moonsun to respond to your question as well.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, I think that we would certainly value having redundancy in our stations. The first goal, of course, being that we make all of our stations accessible. But to the extent that we have redundancy, it may not be having an elevator side by side, but maybe serving a different part of the station so that there is better connections. It all depends, of course, on what is feasible within a station. Some stations have very, very narrow platform conditions, very, very tight mezzanines. This station, we're fortunate to have a very large mezzanine and some room, but it will depend on each station. We would certainly welcome redundancy at some point in time, but the first goal is to make a station accessible.
Okay, thank you. We can always come back if you have any follow-ups, Nancy. I just see that we have lots of members who have questions, so I just want to move the conversation along. I see that Matt, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, just a quick question to clarify the number of stories in the building. I had seen one, I think the project label says 63 stories. And then when you kind of count all the floors and the podium and the floors of bulkhead, it looked like it was 69. So I just wanted to get the total, the confirmed story number, please.
Yeah, actually, can you go to the slide that is before the slide that says placement of bonus floor area? Because this is the slide, I think that, so the one before. Okay. So I think here we can see the breakdown of mechanical floors and mechanical bulkheads and the breakdown of stories, or maybe there's a better slide that you can use to actually address Matt's question with a breakdown of stories.
I don't think that we have here a better slide. This is Jason from OMA again, but I can confirm that it's 63 stories, including all mechanical levels and everything else.
Can you actually speak to the height of those mechanical floors?
Yes, all the mechanical floors are below the new limit of 25 feet, and they're all 25 feet high to accommodate equipment and kind of also fire tanks at the appropriate levels.
Yeah, and the spacing between each of the mechanical floors is greater than the 75 feet. They're actually spaced at 291 feet, 211 feet, 204 feet, and 236 feet. And they're spaced in that dimension in order to kind of adhere to the various kind of fire zones required throughout the building. So they'll have fire tanks at each of those floors. Those are also moments where they're structural floors that engage the structure, the outer shear walls back to the kind of core of the building. So they're also, of course, acting in a very important purpose to keep the building up.
Thank you.
Sorry, how many mechanical floors do you have total?
We have 5 mechanical floors, and that's not including the mechanical penthouse or mechanical bulkhead at the top.
Okay, and the bulkhead, according to this drawing, is 5 floors of mechanical.
That's correct. Forgive me, I misspoke. We have 4 mechanical floors, not including the bulkhead, and the bulkhead has 5 floors.
Okay, so
And those,
yeah,
right.
Matt, go ahead.
no, I think that was maybe me, Jason.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the mechanical bulkhead at the top includes, of course, mechanical equipment, but also the tune mast damper for the building and other electrical equipment and other things.
Building maintenance unit.
Oh, yeah, the building maintenance unit.
Yeah, coolers and chillers for the building, air handling units, and other mechanical equipment.
Okay, and how many structural floors do you have?
There's four, the structural outrigger floors, we have four of them that are the same as the mechanical floors.
So you have 4 mechanical and 4 structural.
The mechanical and structural floors are the same.
Oh, they are the same. They serve.
They are the same. They're the
both.
same floors. Yeah, they serve both.
Okay, got it. Okay, and what is the height of the podium?
The podium is 85 feet along the frontage of 57th Street.
Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. Matt, does that address your specific question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Moving on, Aaron, you get the next question.
Hello. Thank you for such a detailed presentation. I apologize if I missed this, but I just wanted to clarify what was the sort of business justification for the action? Is it design, aesthetic, or it's to make the project sort of financially viable? Again, I thought I missed just what is sort of the business sort of action there? If you could clarify that of why you need that actual additional FAR.
The client wanted to build a larger building and was able to achieve that by applying for the authorization for the bonus and enhancing the subway. Indeed, it's a way of achieving a greater amount of floor area in the building.
Okay, got it. Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify, because so without that additional FAR, this could be a viable project in theory.
That's something that the client would have to comment on, but the desire was to build a larger building and wanted to improve the subway station as the vehicle for doing that. Other developers have built taller buildings using development rights that they've acquired through zoning lot mergers. In this case, the client is building a larger building than the as of right allowance by providing a public benefit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mike, you get the next question.
Okay, thank you. I have 3 sets of questions. The first one is how wide are the 8 sidewalk ramps, each ramp?
Oh, they're, Nat, you should probably answer that, but are there whatever code compliant?
They're DOT standard requirement for the ramp. I'm not exactly sure what the width is, but it's the DOT standard dimensions and standard configuration that is used throughout the city based upon their current standards.
Okay, well, I see ramps that are 2 feet wide and I see ramps that are 12 feet wide. So I just wanted to know if you had a number.
I don't know if Ryan is on, or Ryan, you can pass me that information through our chat. But I would say it's more like 5 feet wide with display. So it's not used. Can somebody zoom into that slide 17 for me? Yeah, you can see the slide over a little bit. So you can see these are about 4 foot. There we go. Yeah, they're about 4 foot wide, 5 foot wide. 5 foot wide at the base, 4 foot. So it's enough for a wheelchair to get down.
Okay, I would just ask that you would speak with DOT and request that they be at least 5 foot or 6 foot wide.
Okay.
The next question is on the sides, on the east side and the west side of the building, there seems to be like a rear yard and a side yard. Rear yard that's 50 feet wide next to lot C141, and a side yard that's about 10 feet wide next to lot 60. How will those just remain empty, or how will they be used?
Jason?
Yes, there is a rear yard on the west side of the building where we're set back 30 feet from the adjacent property line. And then there is a space, an open area between the east side of the building and its neighbor, where we're continuing the definition of the building is set by the required seismic gap to the building to our southeast.
So they won't be utilized at all by the residents or the hotel guests?
So sorry, the rear yard is a rear yard courtyard and may be used by the retail space or the hotel, and the side yard will not. No, it's not side yard, but the open area on the east side will not.
Okay, and my final set of questions is for the podium. Above the podium on the 6th floor, where the slant starts, there's a 41-foot setback on the south side of the building, and there's, I don't know how much of a setback on the east side of the building. Will those rooftops, terraces, or whatever you want to call them, will they be used by residents or hotel guests?
Yes, most likely by the hotel. Yeah.
Both
terraces.
terraces?
There's really a single terrace on the south side of the building, created by that setback that you mentioned, and so that will be utilized.
Okay, thank you.
What about the east side? Because there is also a recess on the east side.
I don't believe that we have an additional recess on the east side of the tower that creates a terrace. We have the main setback of the building is from the south along 57th Street.
Right, it's one continuous terrace that you see illustrated here, kind of going across on both sides, but the lower portion of the podium is effectively split into two within the facade to create this the entrance recess. At the terrace level there, it's one contiguous space.
Okay. Mike, do you have any additional questions?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, I see that you still have your hand up. I don't know if it's a remnant from the previous question or if you have a new question.
Sorry, no more questions. Sorry.
Okay. Any more questions from members of the committee? Renee, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Leila. I'm just wondering, this is the very first time this public services and the bonuses being offered. So I'm just curious about the subway itself. Is this 53rd, is this project particularly onerous, or is this typical in order to site this on 53rd Street? I guess this is an MTA question, you know, compared to say 28th Street or 14th Street, or I know the granting station was already built there by the MTA. So I just want a sense of is this typical or is this unusual, difficult?
I want to make sure I understand the question. You're asking whether this particular station improvement is any more difficult, or where does it fit within the spectrum of station improvements?
Yes, exactly.
I actually would have to get back to you about that because I don't get involved in all the various capital improvements for stations. So I can say that we worked very closely with Urban and the rest of the development team to get to this final concept, and we are very pleased with this concept.
Okay, maybe I can ask the question slightly differently.
Okay.
What is the budget or the cost presented by the developer or the project manager for the subway improvements?
I would have to defer to the development team for that.
Is that something Derek was going to speak to, Caroline?
Derek, do you want to take that one? This
Hello,
is Derek.
Derek, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we can.
So right now, based on the current design, the budget for the project is $30 to $35 million. And that's inclusive of the MCR payment as well.
Okay, as well as the DOT required.
Yes, that is the all-in
Thing.
rough order of magnitude budget as of today.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Renee, as to then further answer your question, I think we should be able to find, for example, the cost of the elevator that was installed by MTA on the corner of, I believe, Park Avenue South and 23rd Street. This is a project that the MTA drove. So it must be in, one of their many monthly, board meeting decks. I'm sure that, spending enough time suffering from enough insomnia, I'll be able to find it. So we'll be able to, get a sense of, comparison of, if it's on par with other projects done by the MTA. MTA, by all means, if you have this information available, it would be, Monson, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, if as a follow-up, someone of your team or, other teams who have worked on these projects can share this data so that we don't have to sift through thousands of pages, would be much appreciated.
I do want to add, each station improvement is different because obviously the site conditions, whether it's at street level or at station level, is different. So it's never going to be apples to apples. And generally speaking, getting a developer to build tends to be more cost efficient than for the MTA for a whole host of reasons as well. And that's why this particular program, Zoning for Accessibility, is one that we're very excited about as well.
I just want to step in for a minute and answer the gentleman's question about the ramp. I was able to check the details. The ramp is 5 foot wide. And then when you get to display at the curb, it's like 9'10". So those are the dimensions that are the DOT standard.
Okay, thank you. Renee, you still have your hand up. I don't know if you have a follow-up.
I do. I'm just curious. It's sort of following on with the maintenance piece, and I don't mean to put the MTA on the spot, but there's no redundancy here, as Nancy pointed out. So my question is, is there any data on how often these elevators go out across what they're a great public service when they work. I'm just wondering if there's any data on how often they are not working.
There is a public dashboard on the elevators. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can certainly send around that website. And it's a public dashboard that is constantly, it's a live dashboard. So it's connected to our elevators and it's being constantly updated.
Okay, that's actually super helpful. Okay, we can take a look at that. That would be great. Nancy, go ahead.
I believe that the MTA and the developer would know the cost to install this elevator. I think that's what we're looking for. The MTA requires cost estimates, and I'm sure the developer does too, at every stage of development, starting with schematic design all the way through the project. So can we get the cost of just the elevator installation, please?
Are you asking for the cost for the contractor to put in the elevator, or
the estimated construction cost?
The hard, I'm really being clear here. You want the hard cost or the total project cost?
Total project cost for the elevator.
Well, what we're doing here is the elevator plus a fare array and a new area for the fair array and the new elevator. So the elevators aren't being put in isolation. There wasn't a place for them before. So other adjustments need to be made to the station in order to accommodate those elevators. So
I'll
Darren,
revise my question then.
Yeah.
What is the total cost of all the subway improvements in this project?
Right. The budget was $30 to $35 million. Everything's not priced out yet. We are adding to the program. The ramps were added recently. Bids haven't been placed for the project, so the estimate is $30 to $35 million for this project.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, so seeing none, I am going to open up to members of the public. I will limit the comments to 2 minutes. We really need to be mindful of the time of members of the committee and other members of the public. And as I said, we have another item on the agenda. It's not an action item, but it's actually a very important matter that has to do with the open restaurant program. So we want to make sure we have a chance to get into this. So I am going to use my phone as a timer, which means that you will not have it on the screen, and I apologize for that. But we are, I will use my phone, and the, okay, the volume is up. All right, so if you are a member of the public and you have a question or a comment on this application, please use the raise hand function. And I see that Jose Truchios has his hand up, and you are permitted to talk. Introduce yourself, and you can deliver your comment or ask your question.
Hi everyone. I'm actually Jose Truchios for the Department of City Planning. So I didn't have a question. I was just wanting to be promoted to, be able to answer any questions prior to the Q&A. Sorry.
We'll promote you immediately. We definitely want you in the room. Thank you so much for being with us, Jose. I was actually under the impression that you were still recovering from, and that you may not be able to attend. So we're thrilled to have you, and welcome back. Yeah, I think Jose, you've been promoted. So, and by all means, if you have any, statement, comments that you wish to make for members of the committee and the rest of the public, go ahead.
Right. Just in general, I think what has been said, we are very happy with this project. It's the very first application for the Elevate Transit text. Seeing more and more of these projects of an otherwise as a right building is something that the city is looking very positive in one of the citywide text amendments that was just recently passed. So we are very happy internally.
Okay, thank you. All right, so going back to members of the public, we have Renzo Ramirez. You are permitted to talk. If you get in.
Okay. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Renzo Ramirez, and I am a member of 32BJ at CIU, here on behalf of the more than 85,000 32BJ members to express our strong support for this project. The developer, Sidesco, has applied for additional floor space for mass transit improvements and to build a new 63-story residential building. We are pleased to announce that the developer has reached out early to make a credible commitment to providing prevailing wage jobs to the future building service workers at this site. We estimate that this rezoning will allow for the creation of 2 new property service jobs. These jobs are typically filled by local members of the community, and because of this commitment, will pay family-sustaining wages, which help bring working families into the middle class. These apartments are needed for working people in the city. This commitment to good prevailing wage jobs will give opportunity for upward mobility, security, and dignity to working class families. 32BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build. We know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. The next member of the public to be recognized is Ian Dunford. You are permitted to talk.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this project. My name is Ian Dunford, and I work with the Hotel Trades Council, the union whose 40,000 members work in hotels and casinos across New York and northern New Jersey. I'm here to voice the union's support for this project. Not only will it result in an accessible subway station, which in and of itself is a huge benefit to our city, but it will also create quality jobs, the types of jobs that the working women and men of New York deserve. Workers at the hotel portion of this project will be compensated fairly for their hard work, will benefit from nearly no cost medical coverage, and will enjoy the security of a robust pension fund. Most importantly, they will be treated with the dignity and respect that everybody deserves in the workplace. The city's hotel industry is experiencing unprecedented hardship. The pandemic has seen hotels close their doors, some for good, and many of our members remain out of work. Projects like this one are a salve to our ailing tourism sector, creating good jobs when they are most needed and bolstering an industry that serves as one of the key drivers of the city's economic engine. The Hotel Trades Council fully supports this project for all the ways it will benefit New Yorkers and the city's economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, well, I don't see any other hands up. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the public?
I just want to chime in. I did put in the chat the MTA accessibility dashboard as well as our status page, so you can.
Fantastic. Yeah, I see that. Great. Thank you so much, Mansoor. Appreciated.
And Leila, I have one more comment. One is that Jose, I'm really delighted you could show up tonight. I hope you feel better. And city planning has been terrific. Jose has been fabulous to work with on this project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the community board for giving us the time. I know we went over, but
well, we want to make sure we understand what is in front of us. So we appreciate the thorough presentation. Okay, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this project? Okay, so seeing none, we're going to move back. I'm going to take the liberty actually to not quite jump into business session right away because I have a question on the actual use of the building. So we do understand it's going to be mixed use, retail at the base, there's going to be a hotel, and then there's going to be residential. Can you actually speak to the residential portion? Is there any affordable housing? And what is the positioning of these apartments? Is it on par with the other super tolls of Billionaires Row? Are you catering to this particular segment of the world wealthiest?
yes, the building is a market. It's a luxury building. It has no affordable. Let me that may have come out wrong. No affordable housing. It's luxury, and there are no units that would be considered affordable under the city programs. The district does not incentivize putting in affordable units. You can't go from 10 to 12 FAR with the high density inclusionary housing program on virtually, all of the portion of the project in the Midtown section. So we can't use that, couldn't use that program for most of the building, and it is a luxury building. So no affordable housing, and the subway bonus program does not require affordable housing as a component of, since we're also spending the money to put in the improvements to the station to make it accessible. The bonus, by the way, goes directly to commercial floor area. The subway bonus does not get used in the residential portion of the building. It's not allowed to be.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. What is the anticipated square foot sale in the business projections that the developer has made? For the
I certainly don't know them, and I believe those would be confidential to the client. He's probably working on the pro formas every month or every week as the economy changes. So I don't know what the pro forma could say that would be of any long-term.
Okay. How many units? How many total residential?
There are
units?
33 units prepared, planned right now, subject to change. The number will always be less than what was studied in the EAS or what would be allowed by zoning by a density factor.
So wait,
33 dwelling units is far less than the square footage would allow.
So 33 units per total or per?
Total.
33 units total.
Yes.
Okay. And walk us through the breakdown of the stories. So the base is for the hotel, and then the upper floors are for residential. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how many floors of residential use are you proposing?
Now that you got to that level of detail, I have to turn it over to Jason.
Sorry, Jason, you're back.
Hi, yes, back to me. So there's altogether, including the lobby, 19 floors of hotel. And then the remaining portion of the building is either the mechanical floors that we discussed already or the residential floors. And of course, there are a number of units that are duplex units, and then including in one triplex at the top. These are the numbers as they stand now. I think that they will change, of course, over time. But as Caroline mentioned, will, of course, always stay well below the number that was included in the EIS study, which was much higher, I think, north of 103 units. So.
Okay, I failed math at school, so you're going to let me use my calculator. Total of 63 stories, minus 19 floors of hotel, minus 4 mechanical, minus 5 mechanical up top.
Correct. Then there are two residential amenity levels currently planned.
Okay, so roughly, let's put it differently. It is 1 apartment per floor.
No, there's a number of duplex and triplex units. There's 33 residential floors, but some of those are duplexes. And as you get to the top, even triplex units.
And do you consider that a duplex do you count it in your number as 2 floors, or is it a 1 floor?
No, it's 2 floors.
Okay, then your building is more than 63 floors.
I don't think it's floor through, Lila. I think is that accurate? It's not a floor through apartment, so there can be multiple units on 1 floor, but they would go up.
And they're on enough floors for the number of units that they have.
We have on lower floors, we have 2 units per floor. You know, at the towards the base of the building where the building is elongated, there's a bedroom on 2-bedroom on the north and a 3-bedroom on the south. And as you move up in the tower, you start to get the duplex and triplex units, which are over 2 or 3 floors.
Okay, thank you. All right, that was actually a helpful clarification. Okay, I'm going to give the same courtesy to other members of the committee. Do you guys have any further questions before we move to business session?
I have one other comment I'd like to make. We did receive a copy of the testimony that was been submitted by the Writers Alliance. I don't want to spend too much of your time reading it to you, but there was indeed a letter.
We did receive it, and it was shared with the committee.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely, yes. I believe that we also received a letter from the MTA, probably a copy of the letter that they submitted to the City Planning Commission, and that also has been shared with the committee. So we are in receipt, and it is part of the record.
Excellent.
Okay, great. All right, so moving to our business session. during business session, as I indicated, only members of the committee are discussing the matter. And we need comments, and you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you have a comment. Nancy, go ahead.
Okay, so historically, One Vanderbilt spent over $200 million for subway improvements for their additional FAR. And this building is only spending 30 to 35 million. So I feel like we could get 2 elevators instead of 1 and request that. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, go ahead.
Just on that point, we had a conversation with the MTA about what kind of the additional ratios were and how much they were sort of whether this was in line, and so they may want to provide some feedback on that.
Technically, we're in business session, so we can't really recognize members of the MTA or the team. I think that we can summarize for members of the committee that we did have a conversation with DCP and MTA in preparation of this meeting, where basically they explained to us that the way this provision works is that it is a percentage. So the percentage, if applied to a very small lot, generates a fairly modest amount of additional density. If you apply the same percentage to a very large lot, then you generate obviously much more square feet of density. So I think that because in this particular instance, the MT and DCP feel that it is a smaller lot. It's not small by any means, but they consider that it's smaller. It's, for example, smaller than Vanderbilt. Then they consider that it is commensurate. I think this is something that it's a good segue to indicate that it is the first time we're reviewing these kinds of applications. It is actually the very first application using this very brand new provision. Which kind of puts us a little bit on the spot, because we need to get it right. We need to really understand what it is that is in front of us. We need to make sure that we are asking ourselves the right questions in looking at what the developer is getting, what the city or the MTA, which is the state, is getting in exchange, how this is going to function. So there's a little bit of pressure on us. So I think that you're raising an important point, Nancy, and I think that trying to figure out if it is commensurate is really the tricky question here that we have to grapple with. Moving on, Clayton, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. You just summed up very much how I feel, kind of not confused, but just aware of the balance and how difficult that is. I agree with what Nancy just said. And the other thing I just want to add right now, the main thing on my mind is just, the applicant and the developer did a very good job of framing this from their perspective about the building. But just because I feel like certain phrases have to be balanced with our public record and the issues and priorities that we have for the district, you cannot say that this building is, quote, on the lower end of anything. Just because it is not the tallest building in the city does not mean that it is appropriate for our district or that the benefits that we would get from the transit improvements are commensurate. So I really, really want to highlight that we heard that this building fits well within the skyline. And it is perhaps accurate, since there are taller buildings that have bastardized the view of Manhattan for everyone and cast shadows over Central Park and created canyons in these extremely dense and busy streets. However, you cannot accept that it fits well within the skyline simply because there are taller buildings on the block. So anything that we hear now and discuss as in business session about the benefits of this transit improvement, I think we all need to be extremely cognizant of our many, many, many years of passionate advocacy, trying to raise DCP's awareness of the enormous problems that were committed against our city and our district by allowing these super talls.
Yeah, very true. Thank you, Clayton. I will point out for the new and newer members of our committee that in 2015, when the first super toll was built, CB5 created a task force. We issued a 11-page report that was basically calling on the fact that, you know, it's not like that we don't like tall buildings. You know, New York City is the epitome of tall buildings. But New York has been actually pretty good over time, you know, starting in 2016 and then again in 2061 with adopting a zoning code that would actually promote tall buildings that would have, you know, the least negative impact on their surrounding. 2016, the creation of the zoning resolution actually is because of a tall building that was casting shadows, and it's the Equitable building. And the irony is that it's now the home of the Department of City Planning. You know, fast forward, we are faced with a problem that is not unique. You know, tall buildings casting shadows on parks, which make the park less user-friendly. What we're advocating, what we have been advocating from the get-go is to create a tool in the toolbox that allows for buildings to still be tall, but be shaped in a way that mitigates these issues. This tool does not exist. And, you know, we are told over and over that the other buildings are as of right. Well, they shouldn't be as of right. There should be a provision that basically allows an as of right framework that promotes a building that is not going to cast such huge shadows on the park. Here tonight, we have the opportunity for kind of the first time. It's not exactly the first time because the Nordstrom Tower was actually relying on a number of special permits, and they did have to come to us. So let's say, you know, for the second time, we have the opportunity to look at a super toll on Billionaires Row and, you know, have our say. So I think that, you know, we should not limit our comments to whether we believe that, you know, the transit improvements are good. I think we all agree. And, you know, the same way we did in our resolution on the zoning text itself, that accessibility is absolutely essential, and that, you know, it is shameful to hear that 40% of the subway stations in Midtown, which are the most heavily used in the city, are not ADA compliant. That being said, we need to take the opportunity of the review of this particular project to, you know, raise the concerns that we have. So moving on to the next comment, I see that Aaron, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So that I agree 100%, Layla, with your comments. And I just wanted to chime in, agree with everything Clayton said. I also agree with Nancy's comment about, you know, just not being good enough based on, you know, some other precedents. 100% agree, like accessibility is really vital, but we can't, like, this is not the way to do it. Like the MTA needs to prioritize accessibility, and we can't just wait to do it like this. Like we need to do it, but it can't, you know, it can't sort of be the cause and effect of this in return. It's tragic what we're seeing here. And you see that one ironic image where it looks like the Empire State Building is barely, is like actually not visible with the sort of monstrosity of this building in front of it. So it's just the impact on the skyline is tragic, and we've got to have a different way to get accessibility in Midtown. And this is not the way to do it. And the MTA should have a better plan.
Yeah, thank you. EJ.
Layla, my comment is kind of a technical question that you might be able to answer, because I was not on the board in 2015 when the you know, rezoning was taking place, and a lot of the rules were created. Just for the sake of argument, you know, we were comparing to One Vanderbilt. One Vanderbilt provided a kind of public realm and transit improvement that my understanding was like selected off of a menu of potential improvements that equal a certain FAR bonus. So I guess what I'm asking is, if we're kind of comparing, you mentioned percentages. Is the percentage of this FAR bonus the same as that one, or this one being quote unquote just an elevator and accessibility improvement, as opposed to new mezzanines, new entrances, new stairwells, etc. Is this one calculate? Obviously it's smaller because you mentioned there's a smaller lot, but is it also a smaller percentage or a smaller rate because it is a lower impact improvement?
So in 2018, when the East Midtown, well, actually, no, let me backtrack even more. One Vanderbilt was built under what then became the Vanderbilt Corridor Special District. So it's actually its own little sliver of a district along the Vanderbilt corridor. Then it inspired what then became the East Midtown subdistrict. So to try to answer your question, I think we are looking at two very, very different real estate products. One Vanderbilt is a commercial building that has the purpose of serving businesses and companies that are looking for Class A office space. And at the time, we were told and explained that there was a shortage of Class A office space in Midtown. There was a great deal of inventory in the financial district. We understood that Hudson Yards was going to come online, but we heard that Midtown was lacking modernized and more Class AA type of office space. Here, what we're dealing with is a very different kind of product. It is a luxury building in an area that actually is struggling to sell luxury apartments. The Nordstrom Tower is actually really struggling to get rid of their inventory. They're not selling. The very first one, 157, still has units that are unsold. It's a real debacle at 432 Park Avenue with half of the building suing the other half. The building is non-functional. So they serve a very different purpose. One Vanderbilt is a very tall and very massive building, but it's a better citizen in the sense that it is generating growth. It is helping companies run their business. It is providing because they are site of office space. It is providing employment. So all of that, and it is paying its fair share of commercial real estate taxes. These buildings on Billionaires Row are in a different tax category because when they were built, there was basically no comps. So they basically compared the properties to other properties, like they compared it to 2 or 3 bedrooms on Central Park. So they are taxed at an extremely low rate, lower than what a loft in Soho or in Tribeca is assessed for. So they don't pay. Some argue, and we're among them, that they don't pay their fair share in taxes. To answer your specific question, One Vanderbilt got a 3 FAR bonus in exchange for the subway improvements and public realm improvements that they did. This particular project is getting a 2.75 FAR bonus. So FAR is a ratio. So basically, they are multiplying the base of the development site in the case of One Vanderbilt, by 3, and in the case of this particular project by 2.75. So you can see that the multiplier is actually very close. What is different is the size of the lot. This lot is obviously much smaller. One Vanderbilt is a very large lot. So, it generates a net value that is much higher in terms of density for One Vanderbilt than for this project. But you can see that, the bonus itself, the multiplier is actually really close. So, sorry for the very long response, but it's hard to really find a way to compare what would be really, apples to apples or oranges to oranges. It's, these products are different. And, I think that the way to look at it for us in a way is maybe it needs to be simplified. We are the land use committee, right? So do we need that kind of use for the development of this particular site? Is it the best way that this particular plot of land can be developed? We certainly appreciate that, it is private property. The developer can do whatever they want, provided that it is permitted. But we have to ask ourselves the question, is it the best way to use our space? Midtown is at such a premium. Do we need vacant apartments? We know that the vacancy rate in that particular stretch of our district is 42%. I'm not making up this number, it is based on the census. 42% of these apartments are vacant. Is it really the best way to use our land when there's such a crisis of affordable housing? So, that's one way of looking at this issue. We are discussing use. That's the name of our committee. The other way to look at it is to really look deeply at the value to the users of this public benefits. And I think we all agree that providing accessibility is critical, essential, and absolutely amazing. But we also understand that the number of elevators and escalators that are non-functional is very high when they are under the maintenance of the MTA. And as a result, what would be fantastic ends up being non-existent because they're not functional. So, those are ways for us to think of these issues. I'm going to take the next comment from Mike. And, by all means, feel free to, raise your hand again if you want to, further add to the conversation. Mike, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that in general, that I feel like I am supportive of this project. I just would say that it's a luxury building. No, we don't need more luxury, but we do need the elevators. I would again say that it costs the same amount of money to put in a 6-foot wide ramp as to put in a 5-foot wide ramp. You still got to dig up the concrete and pour new concrete. So even though you're going to get a luxury, 33 luxury apartments, the people on the street need to use those ramps, and so we need them to be as wide as possible so more people can use them at the same time. And then I just would call on DCP and the MTA to make better zoning text and better negotiation for the public, because for me, both of these agencies are not helping the public as much as they should.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Matt.
So I'm generally I agree with what Mike said. Generally in favor of being able to get the trains to become accessible. I did have a question. Is the only if they were not applying for more FAR under the new zoning rule, would we not see them? Would this not be an application we saw at all? or would we see it either way?
If they were to build an as of right building, we would not see them. That's correct.
So that's what I thought. And so I think that the main, I mean, it seems like the crux of the conversation is this, as we look at this new zoning rule, is getting the new elevator sort of, and the things that are going around it commensurate with the FAR that they're getting and any other costs we have. It seems to me that's particularly because the building isn't taller, that's actually a fairly positive outcome. And so I tend to support it, but so that was my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Matt. EJ.
I was going to say similar things to what Mike and Matt said. I think, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made here about Midtown, about whether or not we need a luxury building, another one, et cetera. But in terms of the somewhat more narrow question that's before us, to put on my transportation hat for a second, the elevator that we saw tonight seems to be well considered and well designed, and an obvious improvement from not having an elevator. Certainly it's contingent on us as a land use committee to determine whether or not the FAR they're getting in, commensurate for that improvement is appropriate. But, if we were to straight up deny that question that's before us today, the permit of the use of 53,000 square feet of additional floor area for the elevator, as was mentioned, the as of right building is the same height, and a bunch of our comments about preserving the skyline, we can't do anything about that given the question that's before us today. So to me, the question, as Matt said, is whether or not the FAR that they're getting for the subway improvement is appropriate. And, if it is, if we think it's worth the, extra number of units, whereas a lot of units would be going in and a few more units would be going in with an elevator, then I see no reason to stand necessarily in the way of the application, particularly not for any reason such as we don't think there needs to be another building, or we don't like the skyscraperness of it, because really this particular permit doesn't affect those factors at all.
Yeah. Thank you, EJ. Renee.
Thanks, Layla. I generally agree with the comments that EJ just made and Matt just made. I'm just very, very concerned about the money that's front loaded on the maintenance. And if we could have some mechanism, or we could speak to how that could be put in a lockbox or put in some fund so that it's dedicated to these elevators to ensure that they actually work and do what they're supposed to do, I would feel much more comfortable.
Yeah. It's a hard one. I agree with you, and yeah, it's the way the MTA operates. This goes into the general fund, so it may be used to fix the train shed, or do some repairs in other parts of not even the city. It may be used to do some repairs in Ronkonkoma. Sorry for picking on Ronkonkoma. But yeah, I hear you. Any more comments? We're gonna have to bring this to a wrap. Okay, so seeing none, to summarize, I think that the improvement itself is deemed as substantial and meritorious. I think that if I hear correctly, the fact that the as of right building could be as tall or even taller than the proposed building, and the proposed building could actually end up being taller. I don't know that there is any cap, because they're presenting an 1,100 foot building tonight. I think that they still have the the liberty to shape their building whichever way they want. So, in essence, this component, because there is no height limit and there is very little design and massing constraints in this particular area of Midtown, basically means that, the proposed building or the as of right building could have, similar impacts on their surroundings. I will certainly say that, I struggle greatly with, the thought of supporting a project that, really brings unnecessary luxury development in an area that desperately needs affordable housing. It really, feels like a slap in the face. Once again, I don't hold it against the developer. I really feel that, the city is failing us. The city is really, really failing us, and the administrations, over and over have failed us with not providing the adequate tools to actually get, the best possible land use that we deserve. We need affordable housing. There should be a mechanism that says that, if you're getting a special permit, then you need for a residential building, then you need to add affordable housing. By the way, I thought that was the exact premise of the MIH. There should be a tool that says that you should not be able to cast incremental shadows, and that there should be a way to mitigate and evaluate the cumulative shadows of all these buildings. And, this is something that, I remember, attending meetings with Clayton back in 2015 and saying exactly that. We're going to have a wall, and everybody says, oh, no, we're just going to get a couple of tall buildings and we can totally take that. And, very unfortunately, Clayton and I were right. We hate being right when, those kinds of predictions happen. So summarizing, it looks like, on the narrow evaluation of the proposal, we're in favor. It is bringing up broader questions with which we have grave issues. So I think that summarizes the discussion. I don't know how that ends up in a resolution, but if someone wants to make a motion, go for it. Clayton, you have your hand up.
So I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know if this would be an approval with conditions or deny unless, I kind of leave that to you since it's two sides of the same coin. But my motion would be that whichever one of those we feel is right, it should include describing the fact that what was represented was no incremental shadow based on the bulk of the building exterior, and that is what we are referring to in this resolution, so that if there is a material change to that moving forward, it doesn't look as if we knew about it and supported it. So I just think that language should be very careful in the resolution. Secondly, I totally think we should ask for the maximum width of curb cuts technically feasible. That is what Vornado did in response to the same question for their project at 34th and 7th. They happily agreed to do it, and I think that we should expect the same here. And I think we should address something about the funding mechanism. I agree with Renee, and I think it's super problematic. And even though it's a behemoth thing to expect the MTA to change this massive way they do business, that doesn't mean we shouldn't complain about it when we see something that is clearly not an effective way of using money. It should be this lump sum should have separate books that are dedicated to this elevator period. And then fourth, I'm not sure if the committee agrees with me. I personally agree with Nancy that we also should ask for a second elevator, or at least put in the resolution that we want further study, want them to consider that possibility as well. So that would be the details I would suggest putting in the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Clayton. I think on the comment that Nancy made, it is kind of, we know we're not going to get the money, right? We know that, the money will not be set aside, and that, the elevator will break eventually, and that the MTA, we know the MTA is responsible for the maintenance, and therefore we will experience the same as what we're experiencing at, the Lipstick Building or 28th Street. So Nancy's suggestion is the exact solution. All right, you're not going to be able to pay for the repairs in a timely fashion. We need redundancy. And maybe this is where we really get a better text. Basically, and let's say, we can narrow it to Midtown. In Midtown, when you're doing accessibility, subway improvements that provide full accessibility to a subway that currently does not have accessibility, it has to be done with a redundant elevator. We just need two. And that should be, we should ask for a zoning text amendment, and that should be what we get. I think it's, the incremental cost is, I think, can be absorbed on this particular project, and it seems that on an engineering standpoint, it is feasible. The mezzanine is very wide, so here is really the time and the place to make this advocacy. So maybe it would be a deny unless with the very specific condition that could ever change our mind is we would only get on board is with two elevators.
Well, can I just jump in there as well? Like I totally agree with that, but the same issue though, right? Like there's 5 other entrances to the subway station. If you're approaching that station from the south, like it doesn't help you that the elevator is on one of the 6 entrances. Like the MTA should be doing a better plan. Like that's not efficient. And if there's 6 other ways, like that's not the, what percentage of people who use that station even use that entrance? Like that's where there's just not efficiencies. There needs to be a better plan for the MTA to do that. Like you're saying, a second elevator at that location, or why isn't there an elevator at any of the other 6 entrances for this site? And I don't know if that was touched on, but like, where is the data about like what percentage of people are using that staircase anyway, who would need accessible access? And in Midtown, when you have like up to 4 or 5 entrances to a station, that should be a consideration for sure. That if one breaks, there's also, there's more than one entrance has an elevator as a standard practice. I don't know if MTA has the same.
I agree with you. I think that, to me, it makes sense that, those 2 elevators would be in the same bank. But maybe it's not necessary, and we could actually, even more greatly improve accessibility by actually requiring that the second elevator is located at a different entrance. But I think that, short of having redundancy, we run the risk of, rendering this improvement useless, because it would be, down and not repaired in a timely fashion. EJ, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I would agree in that I would just err on the side of flexibility for whatever we write in. I think there are a lot of considerations, when figuring out where to place these things. We saw in the presentation tonight, consideration of, where electrical was laid in the street, where sewers are laid in the street, how much curb space is getting taken up by each elevator that's put in. I think there's a lot to go into it, and I'd be reluctant to just say, each elevator bank that goes in should be twice as big. I think to Aaron's point, there are more holistic ways of planning these types of things. We might, I could get behind a general support for redundancy in these systems across the entire station that goes in, but I wouldn't want to be too strict with what language we end up using.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Nancy, do you feel, as you're the one who raised this really important issue, do you feel that that kind of language would be consistent with the comments and the recommendation that you made?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mike, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So is this going to be a deny unless, or is this a conditional approval with calling on the MTA to make these changes?
I don't know. You want to make a motion?
Well, I would be more comfortable with the conditional approval, because to be frank, I just don't understand. I just don't know how to get into the heads of the MTA. They don't listen to anything.
Well, on this one, it is really up to the Department of City Planning, and then it's actually up to the City Planning Commission to make this determination. They are the ones who are calling the shots. It's, the MTA issued the report saying the improvement is deemed substantial, and that's the requirement to be compliant with the requirements of this authorization. But ultimately, it's the City Planning Commission who's going to say, okay, thank you very much, MTA, for your letter and your evaluation. But we believe that to make it substantial, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So, we do have a legitimate shot in, not only, telling specifically the City Planning Commission what we want, but also moving forward. I think we can anticipate that, this particular new article is going to be used often in Midtown. We actually know of another project by another developer on 49th Street, and the site is ginormous. And therefore, the 20% bonus that they could seek is going to be enormous. We need to be, prepared to make sure we're getting what this, particular article is meant to deliver. So I think that, asking for redundancy and making sure CPC hears us is important. This is CPC is our audience, not MTA, not so much. EJ, you have your hand up.
I'd support conditional approval as well. I think as long as we're getting in there language that CPC and MTA, consider the redundancy aspect of this application, and frankly, maybe even more importantly, that we're putting them on notice that it's going to be something we're looking for in future applications. I think those are the critical parts. And like I said, I wouldn't want to tie our hands to bad design by over specifying here.
Yeah. Okay. Nancy, you have your hand up.
Yes. We mentioned anywhere in our resolution about our concern about the southern part of Central Park being in shade at least 4 months out of the year, like now, going to November to March, where the sun is very low in the sky, in the southern sky. Have we mentioned anything about that? Because Leila, that is a concern that I know you have, I have, LUZ has. Have we mentioned that at all? And we don't have any study from this applicant regarding that. We really should see that.
Yeah. So, Clayton mentioned that, he wants it duly noted in the resolution that the applicant is representing to us that there would be no incremental shadow with this particular project as compared to the as of right. What I would like to see in this resolution is actually mention of this very fact that, the cumulative effect of this particular project with the other already built buildings, as well as the future buildings that could come online. I just want to mention that the site to the east that used to be known as the Rizzoli building, where the Rizzoli store used to be, and adjacent to the Chickering building, very historic buildings. Those buildings have been acquired by Lefrak and Vornado and are ripe for development. They're probably trying to figure out which subway station they're going to improve, or they're trying to further their lot assemblage. But it is going to be developed, so there's going to be more super tolls on the southern portion of Central Park. I think it is really important, although not totally in direct connection with the specific action that they're seeking. I think we should mention it in the resolution. I agree. Renee, you have your hand up, and then we're really going to have to bring this to a wrap.
Sure. Just very quickly, in line with what you said cumulatively, about shadows, I think that goes for the environmental access study in its totality, right? Because they take each building in and of itself. And when we think of all the buildings that are there, the impact on childcare, education, fire, police, I mean, one building in its own doesn't affect anything, but we don't take them in their entirety, you know, what's happening to the neighborhood. Could we mention that as well? Or is that totally off point?
No. I think it's totally fair. You know, it's the big flaw of the environmental review. You know, that you only study the tiny little incremental portion that you bring, and if that particular increment does not reach a threshold of concern, then you're good to go. Even if, you know, all the other buildings have already, you know, reached this level of concern, you can still add to the damage. So yeah, I think it's totally fair. Okay, so we're going to need a motion. If I hear correctly, it is going to be a conditional approval. I can't make the motion because I'm the chair. And then we need a second. All right, so we have a motion to approve with all the conditions that we have listed and all the criticism to the actual formula on you know, how these projects are being evaluated, shadows, and you know what Renee just said. So Matt, you're still with us. Fantastic.
Yes.
If we can take a vote on this motion.
Okay. Layla?
Yes.
David Aculus? He's still here?
I don't see him.
Athena?
Yes.
Benzing's out. Julie?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Gashow?
Yes.
Greeley?
Yes.
Haas?
Yes.
Hartman, I'm a yes. Jackson's out. Kalifarsky?
Yes.
Kinsella?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
And that's Whalen is out. So that's it. So that passes.
Motion carries, unanimous vote. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to the team of applicants, members of the MTA, the Department of City Planning. So let's jump right into our next item. As our chair, our fierce leader, Vicky Barbero, announced in an email yesterday, CB5 has created a task force on the open restaurant program. As you remember, this committee, alongside I think maybe two other committees, did review an application, and I just want to acknowledge the applicant who is waving at us, saying
Thank
goodbye.
you.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate the presentation. As you recall, we did hear the zoning text amendment on really the zoning, the very narrow zoning aspect of the open restaurant program. So DCP is no longer overseeing this program. It has been entirely shifted to DOT. And we felt it was very important to create a task force to actually be able to chime in, weigh in, provide substantial comments to DOT and other agencies, as well as our elected officials, on what we believe would make the program successful, because we know that the program has been made a permanent feature of the city. So in discussion with the executive committee meeting and the executive committee and the chairs of the other committees, we decided that creating a task force would be the way to go. And we also decided that folding and housing this task force within the land use committee would make sense. One of the reasons for that is that all the chairs of the committees are actually standing members of the land use committee. So it would be a good way to basically have, all the chairs involved through this way. We felt it was also important to broaden the membership of the task force with members who are not on land use, and bring the unique set of skills and expertise that they have serving on these various committees. So this tonight is basically the public announcement that this task force has been created. We're very grateful that Nancy has agreed to chair the task force. And I'm going to, turn it to her so that she can tell us what this task force will entail, and then the chairs of the other committees that have this specific expertise can also speak to that. So, Nancy.
Layla, before we go to Nancy, I'm sorry, Nancy, there are a number of task force members that are participating as attendees. Can we promote them to panelists so they can better participate?
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Do you want to
maybe ask them to raise their hand if they know?
Great. So if you are attendee and are on the task force, raise your hand, and you're all being bumped as panelists. Great. Do we have, Nick, do you see any?
I think they're all in.
Okay, fantastic. Right, so turning it to Nancy.
Okay, good evening, everybody. While we were doing all this, I was sitting here thinking about how we might approach this task force report. We want to end up with a report that we can submit to DOT. And so we have 6 committees of Community Board 5. We have Transportation and Environment, BEX, PSQL, Land Use and Zoning, Landmarks, and Parks and Public Spaces. And my thought was that each committee, who has 2 members, is my understanding, Layla, onto this task force, would put together a list of issues that would be related most to their role on the community board. And they would be sort of bucket ideas, if you will. So I'll give you an example. T&E would have encroachment into sidewalk and street, regulation of that, regulation of deliveries to and from restaurants, safety for bikes, pedestrians, delivery folks, for street uses, and to minimize the conflict of street and sidewalk users. So to get the gist of what I'm trying to say here, it is each committee has its own already area of expertise. And if we can apply that to these sidewalk buildings, temporary buildings, we can then come up with a complete community board approach, and all of our issues will be covered. So BEX, for example, would be budget for review and enforcement, and maybe they would also get involved in the health department requirements of what is a required inside a restaurant should also be considered in the outside part of the restaurant. It's still part of that restaurant. PSQL would be focused on noise, hours of operation, security for patrons and neighbors. LUZ would be focused on the area occupied by the shed, the as of right calculations, the height of the shed, possibly the adjacency to the restaurant space and the relationship to the leased and owned restaurant spaces. Landmarks, I thought maybe would be structural stability, signage, appearance, and harmonious design in keeping with the district and location, how to minimize the visual impact on the street wall. Parks could be involved in safety, accessibility, greenery and planters, control of music, TV screens, cheering and shouting, which I've observed comes from these sports bars that are outside. storage for removal, and street use permits. We have a list of requirements. We might be able to add those into these facilities. So that's off the top of my head, some of the things I'm thinking. We would have the issues, the buckets. We would then come up with a regulation to cover each of these issues that we feel are important. And if we could, I would like to have a picture of an example of what compliance looks like and what non-compliance looks like. So I'm thinking that we do this in our committee structure, and then we come together in the LUZ meetings that Layla will be holding, and we will talk about that together. That's my idea, Layla.
Yeah, excellent. So just to be totally clear, the task force will be its own thing. It's housed within land use, but it will be its own thing. The meetings will be chaired by you, Nancy, which we're very appreciative for, and it will not really have too much of a fluidity with like the land use committee will chime in on an equal footing as all the other committees. So I think
these ideas were just off the top of my head. This doesn't have to be the issues. I'm just giving you examples of matching up issues to committee function.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. I think we can have a few words from the chairs of our committees. I think they are all here. Yes, I see you all. So I think that there was some order that was suggested. I'm sorry. Yeah, so Clayton, maybe you want to start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I am chair of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, as everybody here knows. And so as a kind of just refresher for everyone, the most relevant experience that this board has weighing in on applications, anything like open restaurants, was sidewalk cafes. And so we kind of wanted to keep the model right now that exists of having a discrete body talk about the regulations and guidelines and input that we can have about the operation, and then and separately talk about like licensing, for example. So as it happens now with sidewalk cafe applications, Parks and Public Spaces is the place where we hear the appropriateness of the use of the given space as per DCA and DOT regulations for sidewalk cafes, and also as per our interests and the things that we see on a case-by-case basis at that particular site. So at Parks and Public Spaces, our members have the expertise of reviewing those applications and looking at, is the 8-foot clearance acceptable throughout the entire length of the proposed site? The distance to planters, to mailboxes, to streetlights, is the type of permit they have the types and numbers of seats that are allowed, etc. So very much technical and very much about measurements and clearance and all those kinds of things. And so once that finding has been made, then historically we pass that along to PSQL if they are also seeking to serve liquor. I'll let Nick speak to that. But our kind of initial ideas about this, I think Nancy's totally right, that the individual committee members' expertise in all these different areas, and those buckets are a great idea, weigh in together so that the group can make sense of how we've heard sidewalk cafes as an example in the past and how we can broaden that approach, maybe carry over certain specifics exactly as far as measurements, maybe, and then what things have we not ever had regulation around that we need to come up with something. So that's typically what we hear at Parks and Public Spaces regarding outdoor dining and the analogous ways that we'll be moving into open restaurants.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Clayton. Nick, do you want to take it from there?
Thanks, Layla. I think people can already see how interconnected this topic is with all the different committees already. I think Nancy was very accurate when she described the things that PSQL would be concerned about on the task force: noise, hours of operation, music, patron conduct, things like that. And Clayton touched upon how liquor licensing would be a part of this as well, should the space require or seek a liquor license. And one thing that's interesting now, the SLA has started requiring that the operators who want to license these spaces now have to notify the community board that they are seeking an amendment, an alteration to their current liquor license to do so. So the framework for this analysis is already starting. And I would foresee that the task force would continue even after a recommendation is made or whatever report Nancy produces. I think the task force would continue reviewing these spaces that are applying for liquor licenses as sort of a second look before it goes to PSQL. And we'd have another opportunity to weigh in, once for the appropriateness of the space, and then a second look, is it appropriate to serve liquor at this space?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Nick. Next up, EJ, do you want to touch on the transportation involvement on that?
Yeah, I won't repeat things. As was said, this obviously touches all these different committees from a transportation and environment perspective. These open restaurants obviously make use of street and sidewalk space, which is fundamentally public space that will be used for private business. There are implications for the loss of a lane or the loss of parking spots, how it affects traffic and efficiency in a particular neighborhood. There are implications for how pedestrians navigate, whether or not they're losing, thoroughfares through sidewalk space, and whether certain configurations are forcing, pedestrians into the street, which is unsafe and undesirable, and other such implications, all the way down to whether or not they're being constructed correctly, or whether they're being picked up by, a garbage truck that's coming by and dragged halfway down the block. All these things kind of have to be considered from a transportation perspective. And then there's the environment perspective, which is also to say, Nancy touched on some of these things, but what is it doing to the environment and the livability of the neighborhood, particularly outside. Finally, the city seems to see it as a transportation issue as well, because they're handing enforcement of these things over to DOT, which many committees deal with, but is at least for T&E's part the most frequent city agency that we deal with. So obviously it's aligned with a tremendous number of issues that T&E deals with. The two T&E reps, folks on the task force representing T&E will of course be Nancy and Ryan Whalen, who's not here tonight, but also sits on the land use committee and will be joining the subcommittee going forward.
Yeah, great. And the less obvious but very important issue of budget. I think that do we still? Oh yeah, Renee, you're here. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong mosaic. If you want to jump in, I think it ties specifically to enforcement and how we're gonna pay for it.
Right. I mean, budgets are essentially political instruments, right? So, it weighs public policy against the available public resources. So the lack of a budget or a budget really determines the methods and the means of providing all these programs and services. And you have to lay out the cost of the programs and the criteria about which they'll be evaluated for efficiency and effectiveness. So anything the city does really has an impact on the budget one way or another. And we can look at those implications along with all the other committees. As everyone has pointed out, they're really interrelated. And we're really, really, really lucky from Bex to have Joe Mafia, who has a really strong background in this area. I think, he is going to be invaluable from the Bex perspective.
Great. I will speak very quickly on, land use, you understand, it's a no-brainer. Landmarks, I think that, the bulkiness of these structures and how they, impact the the views of our landmarks is something that we'll be focusing on, and all the good suggestions that Nancy just enumerated are also things that we'll be looking at on a from a landmarks and historic preservation perspective, and we'll bring that to the plate.
Leila, can I add one more thing? So there's one thing that I'd like to flag for Nancy and the task force. DOT has already said that they're going to be setting up this structure of requirements and procedures, but they've also implied that they expect to have a whole framework of exceptions to be made. So I think as we comment on these procedures and processes, we have to be careful that we get input not only on the initial requirements, but also on any exceptions that they make, so that we're aware.
Yeah, that's I think it's gonna be tricky because they're barging through with recommendations that, and I think they have started scheduling hearings. I'm not totally sure where that stands, but I think also that we'll have to be cognizant to the fact that yesterday was election day, yay, and on January 1st we're getting a brand new administration and a pretty broadly renewed city council, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
My understanding that the first hearings that are coming up will be regarding the structures themselves, the physical structures, and that's going on now.
Oh, okay. Okay, so does that mean that we are missing the opportunity to comment on that specific?
No, but the comments are not yet due, but the first part of the analysis will be the physical structures. And I imagine Nancy will talk to Marisa about what's going on more closely and when our comments are due on that.
Okay.
Well, and I would like to ask Marisa also, I believe we've gotten a lot of complaints from residents of the neighborhood. Is that true, Marisa?
Yes.
So I guess we need to, I was wondering if it's possible to distribute the comments, relevant comments to the various committees where it's their area of expertise, and then they can add that into their overall bucket and comments and their report back to the main committees. Do you think that's possible?
I mean, I can certainly do that going forward, and I could search for some going back a couple of months, but I don't know that I could find ones prior to that. I can generally summarize some of the complaints.
That'd be great.
Around some of the issues for the
that
around
would be
various
great.
issues.
My understanding is there are a lot of people that are very upset.
We can also, Nancy, we can pull 311 data and get information that if people have made 311 complaints, we can pull that data from the city.
And who would, I need to know who would, I don't know if I would have the time to do that, so.
That's something that the board office has always done.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think that the goal of the task force is actually to assign the work to members of the task force, so that if it's chopped off in smaller bite size, it's easier to handle than having one person doing all the work.
Well, in some cases, we already have these sort of list of requirements. The Sidewalk Cafe is one, but also when we were doing street use permits, we had a very specific list, and I'm not sure who does the street use permits anymore. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Where someone wants to have I guess Clayton, that's your committee as well, right?
Well,
someone wants to close off a street for a fundraiser.
That would be transportation, and then the events that were after the parades was always parks. Those things were relevant too, yeah. the reports we've issued in the past could be looked at for this group, sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good beginning because we already have an idea on these various committees of what we're looking for when someone comes with an application for a permit.
I got another point.
May I just ask about the enforcement? You're saying it's going to DOT. Would that include noise? Or do we know?
I don't think we know.
Yeah, I don't think the rules have been written yet. Then we don't know what they're enforcing.
I've got another point.
Yes, Nick.
So initially it was discussed that we would also have some members of the public on the task force. And I've spoken to the 29th Street Association. They have 2 people willing to participate. Is that something that we want to proceed with? And if so, should I reach out to them?
I would be in favor.
We typically, like all the task forces that PSQL has done, we've included members of the public. I've always found that very helpful.
We did the same for the Madison Square Park events report. Yeah, I'd support that.
So Vicky, I think it's your call. Okay, all right, I'll reach out to them, and Nancy, I'll give you their names. I'll introduce you so that you can incorporate them into the task force.
Okay, we're going to try to do this by committee. So they would be, I guess, their own committee. They would be the public member committee, right?
Well, they would be members of the task force.
Right, okay.
Public, yeah.
I'm trying to use the structure of the community board that we have now, so we're not reinventing the wheel, to give us some structure. That was sort of my thought.
Got it.
Yeah. So I see that we have someone in attendance with their hand up. I think
Layla, before George speaks, I just put into the chat the link to a program created by Beta NYC. They're subcontracted by the Borough President's Office. They have a program that allows you to see complaints, liquor licenses, all the addresses for the residents within different community board areas. It's relatively user-friendly, so you can take a look at it. And you can easily see restaurants that have had a lot of complaints just by the number of dots they have on them. But there's also a recording of the training that they had last week on this issue, and there were some members of PSQL that were there. And I'm happy to send that around to the task force.
Yeah, I mean, the tool is simply amazing. I just adore them. I find it to be a little hard to use at times. So I think having the training, some sort of a tutorial would be super helpful. Yeah, so thank you, Marisa, for sharing that. Before I move to public members, I see that Tristan has his hand up. Tristan.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, when it comes to soliciting like public feedback and public information, I think those complaints and the databases are there to capture their complaints, and that's going to be good. But I'm wondering if maybe we should send out some type of solicitation to our listserv to see if there's maybe positive feedback that might be out there that we don't really have readily accessible and could also be used to inform the conversation from the other side of things.
Well, I have been thinking about reaching out to, for example, Municipal Arts Society and some of the good government groups around the city that would have opinions on what we're doing in terms of a positive planning strategy, or how this might be a definite benefit to the city.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Is that what you had in mind, Tristan?
Yeah, something like that. Or like, there are probably restaurant owners who are on the CB5 distribution lists who would probably jump at the opportunity to, voice their views of what a windfall it's been for them. But That sounds like a good idea to me.
Should we have someone join or attend the city's task force, the open restaurant task force, design task force?
Nancy, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. You send me the information. I'll find out more about it.
I just sent the link to their page. It's got their timeline spelling out when they expect to get this thing up and running. And they have a legal timeline as well as a public engagement timeline.
Yeah, definitely. We should be looking at that. Yeah, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
And I see that George has his hand up. George, go ahead. You are permitted to speak.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Just a quick note that the amount of street space available for pedestrians and for green streets and for dining and whatever else is really a function of how much traffic we have on the streets. And we do have a plan approved by the state legislature, at least nominally, that calls for congestion pricing across 60th Street, which would greatly reduce the amount of vehicular traffic in our community district and on the other 5 that are in Midtown. So I think we really need to be thinking about year 2 or year 3, and actually plans do take 2 to 3 years just to formulate. So I think we need to think more than just restaurants. We need to think of how do we use the street space. And I'll just leave it at that. I sent a note about that. I had written a note way back to the borough president 2 years ago about needing a comprehensive street use plan. I brought it up to EJ and others on the committee that we need to have not just a random sprinkling of this or that we need to think about all of the street uses in a coherent, comprehensive way. I'll leave it at that for tonight, but that's my rant. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, George. Well, if I can just, continue on that theme, I think that it ties to our advocacy for a director of the public realm. I think this is exactly where, someone with that hat that has, a comprehensive approach would be invaluable. I will just say that, personally, I struggle with the notion that, we take it for granted that restaurants should have access to our roadbed to conduct business where other businesses wouldn't. I patronize restaurants and I'm, happy occasionally to use such space, but I also would love to be able to, I do patronize gyms, for example, and, the thought of, using the roadbed to do fitness is something that, could make sense. And, so I struggle with the idea that, there's one particular industry that can, but others can't. I don't know how that ties with fairness. Those are, ideas that, I don't have totally a fully baked conviction on, but, I wrestle a little bit with, the idea that one industry is permitted, what others aren't. So I don't know if Nancy, do you want to take the closing comments, or if there are any further comments from members of the public? I don't see anyone with their hand up.
I just want to thank everyone. These are fabulous ideas, good thoughts, wonderful way for us to begin this. I think you've covered everything, everyone has. So I'm really excited about this. All the boards, I think, are looking into it, and I think we've got a really good example of how to do this just the way it's been laid out tonight. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vicky. I just want to say I'm really excited about this IMA. I like to go to these outdoor restaurant buildings, structures, but I drove down recently, actually, last night from 83rd Street down to 16th Street. And I have to tell you that some of these sheds are horrible and others are beautiful and really add to the ambience of the city. But it does need to be regulated. And I hope that you will all be here to help me do this and put me back on track when I get off track. And please give me all the feedback you can, because that's how I work. I gather information, and out of that, we'll make something together. So thank you all.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And, thank you to all the land use committee members who have been, corralled and coerced into serving on this task force. Appreciate it. What I will say to that particular point is that we do anticipate that the workload of the land use committee is going to slow down a little bit, simply because of the change of administrations. The next administration is going to take, a little bit of time to, get to speed and reviewing, their next batch of applications. So that's going to give us a little bit of a breather. So I don't want you to feel that, we're going to be slammed with additional work. I'm hoping also that what I'm saying right now is not just wishful thinking, but I think it should hold true.
Layla, can you introduce the various people that are specifically on the task force? I know that
maybe Vicky or Nick can do that. I unfortunately do not have the list. And
well, maybe I'll call off the committee. So for PSQL, Nick, who do we have?
PSQL, Samir and Todd.
Okay. Welcome. And LUZ, Layla.
So because we are the host, and because the task force is folded within the land use committee, it's everybody on land use.
Okay.
Ends up being corralled, whether they like it or not. You're it.
Landmarks.
I believe it would be just me, but I would make sure that we possibly involve other committee members.
Parks and public spaces.
Also, I think Karen was here from Landmarks, right?
Yes,
Karen.
I'm on. You're not alone, Layla. I'm here.
Okay.
Awesome.
So what about parks and public spaces? Who's representing?
Yeah, Parks, we have Sam Johnson, who has been working on sidewalk cafes for 47,000 years, and Dave Michaelis, but also very happy that Todd and other members who overlap with other committees are also be representing Parks issues too.
And Bex, we have Joe Mafia, and who else, Renee?
So I think Kim may be joining us. I'm not positive, but I also see overlap. I see Tristan here. Sorry, Vicky, you were going to talk.
I was just going to say I called her, but I have not gotten a call back. You have not heard from her yet?
No.
Okay. We're hoping it's Kim McCall, Nancy.
Okay, great.
But I do see Sam and Tristan, which are overlap with Bex as well.
Right. So I just want to say welcome everybody to our committee. I'm excited to be working with you all. This is a brilliant group of very community-minded people and activists, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you and getting to know you better. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's very exciting. So I think we can anticipate that the Open Restaurant Task Force will have an agenda for the December meeting. So, put it down. It will be at the, regular day and time of the land use meeting. And Nancy will be communicating with all of you. And unless there is any other pressing comments, I think we're ready to adjourn. Although I see that, Todd, you have your hand up. I want to make sure that you're given a chance to speak. Todd, do you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that having worked on both the Parks Committee and TSQL and having done due diligence on outdoor cafes and many outdoor spaces and for the liquor licenses and just having been around the neighborhood, you know, so for example, if you walk down Koreatown, or even if you walk down the Broadway corridor, where we had a task force where we were recommending appropriate use for that part of town that pre-pandemic was just being overrun with foot traffic and new establishments. It's just incredibly important for us to get this right. And, you know, a Wild West or poor regulatory effort by the city, you know, we can see even now during the pandemic that, you know, some of the streets have just been overwhelmed by varying qualities of outdoor spaces and by refuse problems and by loud noise. You know, in one sense, you know, we did as a community board support this as an emergency measure, and thank heavens we did. But on the other hand, when I think about all of the due diligence, application, and efforts with the old regulatory scheme, that, you know, we went through efforts, and I think we did a good job in trying to balance the needs of the neighborhoods and the cities. You know, it seems like, you know, it could all go out the window unless this gets done right. And, you know, we have our work cut out for us. I just hope we can provide a report, make recommendations, and we can get the right people to listen.
Yeah, I think it's exactly on point. So Nancy, the weight is on your shoulders. All right. I think that that is the perfect way to conclude this session. I want to thank you all very much for your work on the land use item, as well as this discussion. Looking forward to seeing everybody next week. And on that note, the meeting is adjourned.